Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into a really significant historical commentary on Kitab, the Book of Knowledge. Our goal really is to navigate through centuries of scholarly discussion to tackle this fundamental question. What knowledge is truly, absolutely essential for every single person?
Right, and that question is exactly what this text tries to answer. Its whole purpose is to, bring some clarity by drawing a very clear line between two types of religious obligation.
Okay, two types.
Yeah. First, there's the farz-al, that's the individual necessity, what you personally have to know.
Got it. The must-knows for everyone.
Exactly. And then there's farz-al-kifaye, that's more like a communal duty, a safety net. Knowledge the community needs someone to cover, but not necessarily every single individual.
That's a huge distinction. It basically defines what everyone needs versus what specialists need to handle. So where do we start? The foundation.
The sources lay the groundwork with a couple of really famous sayings. The first one is the absolute core mandate, alim talep etmek her muslimana farz-ı.
Which means?
Seeking knowledge is obligatory for every Muslim. Simple, direct, universal.
Okay, and there's another famous one, right? About China.
Ah, yes, the one that's become almost proverbial. Seek knowledge, even if it is in China.
Right, which immediately sounds like, pack your bags for a massive trip. But the sources say it's not quite literal, do they?
Exactly. What's really interesting is how the scholars interpreted this. They explain it's a metaphor, basically.
A metaphor for what, though?
For distance and hardship. China just represents the furthest, most difficult place imaginable at the time. It means, essentially, there's no excuse. No distance is too far, no effort too great. Even if they're all literally packing up your saddlebags and traveling far, you still have to pursue knowledge.
So it really emphasizes the incredible effort involved and kind of elevates the whole process.
Absolutely. It highlights the sheer honor of this pursuit. There's even a tradition mentioned that the angels, the Malaiki-Kiram, spread their wings out of respect for someone seeking knowledge. Just shows how valued it is.
Wow. Okay, so the mandate is clear. Everyone seeks knowledge, no matter how hard. But then, as you mentioned, things get complicated.
Oh, very complicated. The sources show this was a huge point of debate. The instruction was there, but what knowledge? Which specific knowledge counts as far-alain, the individual must know? Apparently, there were more than 20 factions, Yermi Furkadan Ziyadai, arguing about it.
More than 20. Just on this one point, why so much disagreement?
Well, the text suggests something quite human, actually. It seems each group tended to argue that the knowledge they specialized in was the truly mandatory stuff.
Ah, so they saw the requirement through the lens of their own field.
Pretty much. Let's break down some of the main contenders. First, you had the theologians, the mutakelimin.
Okay, what was their take?
For them, it had to be theology, ilmikelem. Their logic was, how can you act correctly if you don't first understand God's oneness, Tawhid, and his attributes? That deep understanding, they argued, was the real starting point, the absolute necessity.
Right. Foundational belief first. But then the jurists, the fuqaha, had a different idea. Much more practical, I imagine.
Very practical. And their view became incredibly influential. They said, no, the mandatory knowledge is jurisprudence. Ilmi fiqh.
Why fiqh specifically?
Because, they argued, the average person needs to know right now how to pray, how to wash, what's lawful, halal, what's unlawful, haram, the basic rules for buying and selling they encounter every day. That's the immediate practical need.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense too. What about the traditionalists, those focused on the texts?
Yeah, the Eli Tafsir u Hadith. They went straight to the source. For them, the mandatory knowledge was ilmi kitab u sunnah, knowledge of the Quran and the Prophet's Sunnah.
Their reasoning being?
That these are the ultimate sources. All other knowledge, whether theology or law, flows from them. So you have to start there.
Fair enough. And the Sufis, they brought it inwards, didn't they?
Completely. The Tawafi Sufiye. They argued the mandatory knowledge was all about the inner state. Knowledge of sincerity, ikhlas. Knowledge of the heart's condition.
So like spiritual psychology almost.
In a way. Knowing how to purify yourself. How to tell the difference between good inspirations and demonic whisperings, limi shaitan. Their point was, if your heart's not right, none of the outward stuff matters anyway.
Wow. Okay, theology, law, scripture, inner spirituality. That's a lot for someone just starting out. It sounds overwhelming. How did the commentary cut through all this disagreement?
The resolution presented in the source is actually quite elegant because it's so personal and immediate. It concludes that the real mandatory knowledge, the far-alain, is primarily ilmi muamale,
İlmi muamele. How should we translate that here?
Let's call it action-oriented practical knowledge. It's about what you need to do.
Action-oriented. Okay, so
Right.
it's a framework that makes the obligation fit the situation, not just a giant list of abstract rules.
Precisely. It connects directly to the three things required of any responsible adult.
Balik.
Their belief or conviction, itikad, their actions or deeds, fill, and what they must abstain from, their omissions, Turk.
Belief, action, abstention. Got it.
And here's the crucial principle the sources establish. You only become obligated to learn something at the exact moment you become obligated to do it.
Oh, okay. That changes everything. So you don't need to know the entire legal code on day one.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Let's take conviction, itikad. Say someone reaches adulthood at dawn. Their immediate duty is just to learn the two declarations of faith, the shahada, and understand their basic meaning. That's it.
No deep theology required right away.
Nope. The source is clear. No need for complex proofs, tahir a deal, at that specific moment. Simple, sincere belief is enough to start. Deeper study can come later.
Okay, so how does that learn when needed principle apply to actions, Philip?
It's delayed until the action itself is due. So that new adult we mentioned, if they live until noon, when the dua prayer is due, then they become instantly obligated to learn how to perform purification, taharat, and the prayer namaz itself.
Just what's needed for that specific prayer, not all 5 prayers at once.
Exactly. Just enough for dua. Then later, when Ramadan arrives, they need to learn about fasting. Savin. It's incremental.
And for things like charity, zakat.
Same logic. The obligation to learn the rules only kicks in after a full lunar year. Havel has passed on a wealth that reaches a threshold. And even then, it's hyper-specific. The text gives the example, if you only own camels, you only need to learn the zakat rules for camels.
You don't need to learn about zakat on gold or crops if you don't have them.
Correct. That knowledge might be a communal duty, farz kifaye, for someone else to know, but it's not your individual duty, farz ain, until your situation changes.
That must have been a huge relief for learners back then. Okay, what about the third category? Abstaining, Turk. Learning what not to do. Is that also contextual?
Absolutely. It depends entirely on your state and circumstances. The examples given are quite stark.
Like what?
Well, someone who is mute, lal or ebkim, isn't obligated to learn the detailed rules about forbidden speech, kalam al-haram. Why? Because they physically cannot commit that specific act.
Okay, that makes sense.
Similarly, a blind person, ama, isn't obligated to learn the specifics of what constitutes forbidden gazing, nazar al-muharram. The obligation is tied to the possibility of the action.
But what if your situation actually makes forbidden things more likely?
Then the obligation accelerates. If you live somewhere where, say, drinking wine or eating pork is common, you are obligated to learn the specific prohibitions related to those things immediately. You have to seek out that knowledge because the temptation or possibility of transgression is right there.
Got it. So it's about your actual lived reality. This brings us back to the internal dimension, the Sufi focus, the heart. How does this contextual obligation apply to our inner state?
Well, it applies directly. If you experience, say, a serious doubt about your core beliefs, your itikad, you're instantly obligated to seek the knowledge needed to resolve that doubt. You can't just let it fester.
Okay, and this connects to knowledge of the afterlife.
It does. This is where the sources talk about ilmi ihurit, knowledge of the hereafter, which they divide into two important parts.
Right, and the first part uses that same term again, lemi muamele, but in a different sense.
Exactly. Here, muamele doesn't mean external actions, but rather internal conduct or maybe practical spiritual ethics. It's the knowledge of the heart.
Okay, practical knowledge for the heart. Like what?
Knowing the praiseworthy states like patience, sab, gratitude, shukra, sincerity, ilas, and understanding the blameworthy ones you need to fight against pride, kibr, envy, haste out, malice, seeking status, alebi your asset, learning how to cultivate the good and weed out the bad.
And this internal knowledge is considered mandatory, farz ain.
Yes, because certain inner diseases are seen as incredibly dangerous. The sources highlight a tradition about 3 destroyers, the mulikat, things that are almost guaranteed to ruin a person spiritually.
The 3 destroyers, what are they?
First, alis kanli heling gelen simulik, basically deeply ingrained, habitual stinginess or miserliness.
Okay.
Second, kishin hayatın da belirleyici olan arzu, following base desires or passions, blindly letting them run your life.
And the third, it sounds like it could be subtle.
Very subtle and dangerous even for the religious or learned. Kişinin kendisini, üstün görmesi, self-admiration, arrogance, thinking you're better than others. because these three are so destructive, learning how to recognize and treat them is part of that mandatory practical heart knowledge.
Wow. Okay, so that's the practical heart knowledge. What was the second type of afterlife knowledge?
Ilmi Mukashev.
Ah, yes, mukashefe. That's described as something much higher, more experiential. It's like a nur, a light, that enters the heart after it's been purified through that practical mumale.
A light that reveals things.
Exactly. It grants a kind of intuitive, unveiled knowledge, hakiki marifa. Deep, true understanding of God, the nature of prophecy, the reality of the universe, and the afterlife. It's seen as the fruit, the reward of the hard work of purification.
So that's the ultimate goal, but the muwale part, the ethical work, is the mandatory step.
Precisely. Mukashafa isn't demanded of everyone in the same way the practical knowledge is. Okay, that clarifies the individual's path. Now let's circle back to the other category. Farz al-kifaya, the communal duty.
Right, the communal safety net. This covers any knowledge that's considered essential for the basic functioning and survival of society, what the texts call kavam dunya, the stability of the world.
And this is where fields like medicine and math come in, even though they aren't strictly religious sciences.
Exactly. Medicine, Elivitab, is deemed necessary to preserve health and life. Mathematics or calculation, you'll mean hisab, is crucial for trade. Managing inheritances, writing wills accurately, basically, for justice and order in society's dealings.
So if nobody learns medicine, it's a problem for everyone.
A huge problem. The sources argue that if essential fields like medicine are neglected and people suffer or die as a result, the entire community bears the sin because someone needed to step up and learn it.
That's a strong statement about social responsibility. It even applies to basic crafts, right?
Yes, even things considered lower crafts, like the example given as hukam, cupping or bloodletting or tailoring. If no one learns these essential skills, the community suffers, and it's considered a collective feeling.
The sources also categorize other types of non-religious knowledge, don't they?
They do, quite neatly. They classify it into three types. First, praiseworthy, mahmud, that includes necessary things like medicine and math.
Okay.
Second, blameworthy, mezmum. This is knowledge considered harmful or deceptive, like sorcery, trickery, cheves, things like that.
Right, stuff to avoid.
And third, permissible, muba, things like studying history or reading poetry, as long as it's, not filled with nonsense or morally problematic content.
So there's a clear hierarchy. Within the praiseworthy, though, how do they rank, say, jurisprudence versus medicine?
Well, the sources generally place fiqh, jurisprudence, higher because it's considered sharji, derived directly from revelation and prophecy, whereas medicine is more based on experience. Plus, everyone needs fiqh in some measure.
But, and this is a crucial point in the commentary, this very importance of fiqh leads the authors to offer a pretty sharp critique of the jurists themselves, right?
It does, yeah. It's quite provocative. They argue that fiqh, while essential, often functions primarily as worldly knowledge.
Worldly? How so?
Because its main goal is often seen as maintaining social order, regulating disputes, managing transactions, basically keeping society running smoothly, often through the power of the state or the sultan. It's about structuring this world.
Okay, I see the argument. And the danger, then, is that jurists might focus only on that worldly aspect.
Exactly. The commentary warns about jurists, fuqaha, who get completely absorbed in incredibly complex, obscure, and frankly often unnecessary legal details, tefriat depika.
Like really niche legal points.
Precisely. The examples given are things like the intricate rules of li'an, a rare procedure where spouses accuse each other of adultery, or zihar, an archaic specific type of oath making one's wife temporarily unlawful. These are things most people, even most jurists, would almost never encounter in practice.
So they're mastering the footnotes while potentially ignoring the main text.
That's the critique. They become experts in these rare cases, but might completely neglect the fartalian duties of the heart we just talked about. Cultivating sincerity, ikhlas, reliance on God, tawakkul, fighting arrogance. They know the letter of the law for obscure situations, but miss the spirit for everyday life.
And the text uses strong language about this potential pitfall.
Very strong. It warns that a scholar lost in worldly fiqh while neglecting the inner sciences falls into a kind of gurur, a delusion, a dangerous self-satisfaction, a state that, as the commentary puts it, makes the devil laugh and displeases the merciful Rahman.
Wow. That's quite a warning, knowing the law isn't enough if the heart isn't right.
That's the core message, and it's driven home by anecdotes. The commentary mentions the famous story of Imam Shafi, one of the greatest jurists ever.
What did he do?
Despite his immense status, he's depicted humbly sitting before a simple shepherd, Sheban al-Ro, asking him for spiritual guidance, acknowledging, essentially, that the shepherd had mastered the vital inner knowledge that he, the busy legal scholar, felt he had neglected.
That story really captures the essence of the commentary's argument. So the big takeaway for you listening is that knowledge isn't just one thing. The most crucial type, the farhalain, is deeply personal. It's immediate. It's tied to your specific actions, belief, deeds, omissions, and critically, it includes knowing how to purify your own heart from those destructive traits.
And maybe here's a final thought to chew on, drawn directly from the source. The commentary insists that the real value, the honor of knowledge, ilmin sharefi, comes only from acting upon it. Ankak onala amel et miktir. So the question it leaves us with is, why pour all our energy into complex details that maybe don't directly improve our spiritual state or that someone else in the community is already covering, farhali kifaye, when the knowledge needed to save ourselves from inner destruction is right here, mandatory, and waiting for us personally?
A really powerful question to consider. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.